Yo, let's break down Series 4. In this video, I'm going to break down details on Series 4, and I've got every single card that is currently in this series. That's 10 cards, and I'm going to prioritize them on how I personally want to collect these cards and add some synergies to each one. But then, at the end, I'm going to give a little bit of a tier list of these cards on how I think they're actually going to impact the meta and a general sense of how strong I think these cards will end up being. Now, for the most part, from what I've gathered, it seems like Series 5 is going to have the more impactful, game-changing, deck-building cards, which is actually a huge concern of mine because they're the most rare. They're going to be the most difficult to get, especially for new players. Whereas these Series 4 cards, they're a bit underwhelming. They're more like add-ons or can make certain archetypes a little bit better possibly. And then some of them are just straight up weak. I feel like it's like cards that they want to fill in the game because there's a lot of cool abilities that could have their place or their niche. But where else do you put them? You can't make a season pass out of some of these characters. So yeah, it just gets a little bit awkward. Overall, I like how they're handling the acquisition of new cards. It does benefit people who have been playing for longer, which might be a problem later down the road. But for now, it's very cool. So Series 4 is going to cost 3,000 tokens for each card. That is half of Series 5. And based on what we know is that there's about 25% chance in your collector's reserves, those chests, to get 100 tokens. So if you open 30 chests with tokens, you're going to then have enough to get a Series 4 card. That's a lot. Just goes to show how expensive the Series 5 cards are going to be. I really hope they introduce new ways to get tokens other than paying for them, but it might just be paying and then random chance in chests. That also could end up being a problem. I'm curious to know how you feel about this whole new way of adding cards to the collection row, new series, all that good stuff. I've seen mixed reviews. I've seen people be pretty salty, breaking down the math and saying that it's going to end up being pay to win. I don't know where I stand on it yet because I haven't experienced it myself, so I'm going to hold on my opinion, but for now, it looks exciting to me. But let's get into my top 10 here, the priority list, how I'm going to be purchasing these cards and some of the cards that I'm probably never going to touch. Let's do it. Number 10, M'Baku. So this really breaks my heart because I really like M'Baku in the Black Panther series. He's a funny character. He's super cool, but his ability here is so underwhelming. So he's a 1/2 and he has an ability that actually just straight up makes him worse than Misty Knight. If this is in your deck at the end of the game, it leaps to a random location. That is so bad on so many levels. But let's just start with the fact that this has to be in your deck for the ability to actually affect. You're only going to have 3 cards by the end of the game, provided that you didn't get any additional draw. That could happen from locations, even your opponent by playing Maximus. Like there's ways that you could draw cards accidentally. And then if you end up drawing M'Baku, why are you playing him? Like the best case scenario maybe is with like Kazar and buffing him up, but then you could do so many other things with other 1-drops in the game. I was really trying to wrap my head around some synergies with this card, and I was thinking maybe Okoye maybe could be decent to buff him to 3 power. Angela, just to get a last chance +2 at her location if you decide to leave it open, know that he's in the deck. Ebony Maw, because you can't even play cards there anyways, maybe your opponent doesn't put enough power there and then he jumps over and that's 9 power or anything else that you got out there with tokens. So maybe, but this can even be like a negative. Like what if there's the location where it gives -3 power and then he flies on and then gives you another -1 and that loses you the game. Like that could be a bad scenario. Or even like your opponent has the Punisher on the other side. Like, I don't know. I just don't see where this really gets value. And then maybe he just jumps to a location you abandoned because you stacked. You played out turn 6. You put out as much power. You stacked the 2 locations you're hoping to win. So he just gets thrown to the 3rd location that you don't even care about anyways. Why were you running him in the deck? It's not like he thins the deck. Like if this stayed in your deck and then leaped out at the end, that would be a great card. People will run this all the time. It would thin out. It'd probably be broken. It'd almost have to be negative power. But because you have a good chance of drawing this, I don't know. He's going to probably be the last one that I end up buying from the token shop. There's just a lot of better options, especially at 3,000 coins. So let's get into number 9. Number 9, Maria Hill. On reveal, add a random 1-cost card to your hand, a 2/3. You kind of see this stat line in a lot of card games. There's this and that similar effect, and it just ends up being kind of meh. I mean, the best part about this is that it's a focused random card, right? It's a 1-cost card, which on average is probably better because you can play that. probably pretty reliably. And then if you play cards like Bishop, Angela, even the Collector, you know, running that style of deck, well, then you can play that one drop reliably, and then you're getting buffs and you're putting cards to your hand, and it might be good days. But the problem is, I think she just gets overwhelmed with other options, and you don't end up putting her in your deck. She gets cut almost immediately. It's very reminiscent of Agent 13, which was kind of a good card to begin with, but it starts to get phased out really quickly. The obvious deck here is the Devil Dinosaur and Collector deck. Could she have a spot? Yeah, she might. She might fill the 2-drop just perfectly, but I think that would just only last a short while until something better turns the corner, and then this will just lose out every time. We kind of saw that with Nick Fury. He doesn't get played hardly ever anymore. He's kind of, by statistically, one of the worst cards. So I feel like she's going to have the same treatment in kind of all the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And yeah, speaking of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. kind of having similar effects that don't work out, you got Agent Coulson, 3 cost, 4 power. On reveal, add a random 4 cost and 5 cost card to your hand. So basically the exact same thing as what I was saying earlier. You get buffs to the Collector, Devil Dino deck. Maybe these all get run together. You got an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. deck. I'll definitely try that once I collect all these cards with Nick Fury, Agent 13, and it just gives you a crazy curve, and you're adding a bunch of cards to your hand that you might never play. That probably doesn't work, but it does give you options. You got to be honest, it does give you options, and it'd be a funny deck to run. And you know what? I think it would actually be a good deck to run in an Agatha deck, because it gives her options to play things that are actually on curve. She plays Agent Coulson on 3, and then she's got a 4 and a 5 drop to play, and then she plays herself on 6. Like that could work out. You give her the curve. She might not get too funky with it and play something else. She tends to like to play on curve. So I think that could actually be decent. I'm going to definitely try it out with Devil Dino and Collector and all that good stuff. I could see like Collector 3 and then that 4, 5 and then Agatha. Hey, Oh, shoot. We're not quite done with the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. because now we got their giant helipad. The HeliCarrier is a 6 cost, 10 power. Pretty powerful machine. When you discard this from your hand, replace it with 3 random cards. More random. Again, just ends up being weak because of that effect. But this is a little bit different because if you discard it, it's going to give you those cards. And I think that is a little bit better. You can actually still play this with Collector, right? You discard this and then 3 cards are going to add it to your hand. I imagine that's how it works. That's +3 to Collector if you have the available hand space, which you probably do because you're probably running a discard deck, and then you usually with that you never have more than like 3, 4, 5 cards in your hand unless you're running Swarm. Now, one of the best ways I can see this working is with Hela, purely because you can get the HeliCarrier back out with Hela, which is going to be 10 power, which is quite a bit, and you're throwing in a bunch of random cards in your hand, which are going to be distractions for your discard cards to not discard Hela. That's the way I see it. So you can discard this super early and then get a bunch of junk, and that can be fodder to dodge the discard on Hela. So yeah, I think Hela discard is the most obvious application for this card. It has to find a way in a discard deck because otherwise this is total junk. It's a 6/10. Number 6, Titania. So Titania was kind of weird at first when I read her. I was like, wait, why do I want to run that? She's a 1 cost, 5 power. The best stat line in Marvel Snap, okay? When any card is played at this location, this card switches sides. So obviously not great. Your opponent can get 5 power, which is sizable, you know, like that's not something you want to give your opponent. Sometimes giving your opponent a 1-drop that only has 2 power, that's okay. That's a viable strategy. Takes up a spot. It's only 2 power. Don't sweat it. 5, you probably don't want that to happen. But I think there's more than meets the eye with this card. And the more I read and the more I think about it, the more I like it. So first of all, you could do a 0 deck and have this as an option to target. So that the ability doesn't occur and she just stays on your side, and that's 5 power. But that's a little bit underwhelming. So how can we make it so that we're actually affecting our opponent? Because the way I see it is, what if my opponent's setting up a big Wong turn, or they got this big like ongoing synergy something, and then I throw over Titania over there, but then on turn 6 I play a card there again, and she comes back to my side. My opponent doesn't have an opportunity to play a card there because I filled the last spot. That's where I think this card really, really shines, is when you try to play it and then play a card or get your opponent to play a card at a near full location so that she steals the last spot, and then they're tight, they're locked up. So some of the ways I was thinking that might help this is like with Nightcrawler, because you can play Nightcrawler at her location to get her to move any which way that you want, and then you can end up moving him off so that your side is still a little bit more open for her to swing back, whereas if your opponent's still playing cards, they're going to get locked up pretty quick. And then we got Daredevil, who's just going to kind of give you the heads up if your opponent plans on moving Titania, and if they don't, then you have the opportunity to move her, and if you don't want to, then you can just not play at that location. Yeah, so super unique card. I'm pretty excited about this one. The more I think about it, the cooler it gets. Number 5, Orka. So Orka is a 6 cost, 9 power, ongoing, plus 5 power if this is your only card here. What does that sound like? Well, Mr. Namor himself, we have like an Atlantis build coming together here. Not very good though. I don't think it's very good. When do you ever want to play just a 6 drop just for power that ends up being 14? Like there's the Hulk. Okay, so it beats the Hulk, but usually if you're doing the Hulk, you're probably playing Patriot and then something else to give the Hulk buffs. So maybe in that regard it's better, but not really, because if you have squirrels from Central Park went everywhere, or your opponent put rocks with debris, or just anything, if there's cards at locations, this guy's a 6/9 with no greater benefit than being like America Chavez that doesn't thin your deck. So I just don't know. And then it's hard to synergize things with him, right? Because you can't play cards at his location like Onslaught to give him another 5. So I was thinking for synergy is you can use the goblins to lower the power at that location that you want to play him at so that he has a essentially bigger swing. And then lastly, if you can kind of cheat out Orka first, then you can play Spectrum to give him the extra +2 that he just might need to, beat out those other cards like Destroyer, who's running rampant right now. But I have him at number 5 because he looks really cool. He's like a guy with an Orca suit on, or he's part Orca with his face in the middle. Like, I don't even know what's going on there, but he looks pretty awesome. He's got a giant anchor in his hand as his weapon. He just looks cool thematically, and I just want to see this card played, so I got him at number 5. So yeah, I just don't know how I feel about Orca. And then if we compare him to Namor's a 4 cost, so 2 less. He's a 5 power, and he gets +5 power if he's the only card there. He gets up to 10. This guy's getting up to 14. So like 4 power difference for 2 cost. That's definitely not worth it. So I think it's actually objectively worse than Namor, and Namor isn't the best card right now. So I have low hopes for Orca, but he's a cool looking guy, and I'm excited to play with him. Number 4, Luke Cage. Luke Cage is a 2 cost, 1 power ongoing. Your cards can't have their power reduced. When I first reviewed this card in my early Datamine days, I was pretty low on this card. I didn't really see the value in it. I still think he needs a little bit more support to get off the ground, but there are scenarios where he's going to be an absolute legend. When there's negative power inflicting locations, for instance, or if you're running the crazy hazmat combo, which involves like Wong and Onslaught and all this craziness, and then you like negative 1200 power to each card. I've done it before. It's crazy combo. Maybe you throw in Luke Cage and then you win every game if you can pull that off. There's going to be ways. There's going to be more reasonable ways to use Luke Cage and have a lot of value, but I still feel like he needs just a little bit more. Maybe he works in a ongoing deck with the ongoing buffs and then Spectrum, and then you just really use him just so that you can't have your power reduced. I have Cerebro here as like an option because the idea is that some of the locations give you weird power totals and it messes up with Cerebro. Well, at least this won't let that happen by being reduced. And then Valkyrie. So somebody commented last time about this combination, and I was like, that could be actually wild. But there was a bit of debate in the comments, and I don't know where I stand or how this works. So I'm curious to know what you think will happen. So Valkyrie is going to set all of your cards' power to 3. And then Luke Cage is where their power can't be reduced. And in my mind, if I have a 9 power minion and it goes to 3, that is a reduction in power, and that won't occur because of Luke Cage's ongoing effect. So could this be a crazy combo where you play Valkyrie, decimate your opponent's side to 3 power, but your side will retain its power because of Luke Cage? That could be a really good combination of cards, but I could see that not being the case mechanically, and the cards would actually have their power reduced and set to 3, and then it couldn't be reduced below 3. That absolutely could be the wording. And makes sense there. I could see both scenarios, and I feel like I'd have to test it out first, but let me know what you guys think. Number 3, Attuma. A 4 cost 10 power. So like really, really good power right off the hop. And if you have another card here at the end of your turn, destroy this. Which my first thought was, trash. That's bad. You want to play multiple cards at locations, right? All these Atlantis cards are trying to just chill on their own. But the kicker is with Attuma is basically you run Armor, Professor X, or any of those stuff that kind of stops him from destroying himself. Even 0, for instance, to remove his ability. And then he's just straight up 10 power for 4 costs, which is good value. So the more I thought about this card, the more I thought, you know what, that actually fits so naturally into these decks. Why wouldn't you run that? Worst case scenario is he accidentally gets destroyed and then you blew your 4 cost, which might suck. Or he's pulled out of your hand randomly from a location or something. That could be unfortunate as well. But I think he's worth running, and I think he'll find his place in a couple of decks. Number 2, Absorbing Man. So Absorbing Man is a 4 cost 3 power. On reveal, if the last card you played has an on reveal ability, this card copies it. Yeah, that's nuts. That's crazy. Anytime there's a combo card like this, it's going to find play. You look at like cards like Wave, and she's super great. Mystique is awesome. Wong, all these combo focused cards find a way to have their combo shine in light, and you'll really only need one other card to work with this guy, and there's all kinds of on reveals. Even like Ironheart, I didn't even put her up here, but some of the ones I was thinking that would be especially good is Spider-Man. So Spider-Man, you play him on curve this time, you play him on 4, lock down a location, and then you play Absorbing Man and you lock that location again. Well, then you win that location because your opponent can't play anything on turn 5 and 6 respectively. And then there's Wave. What if you want to lock your opponent's hand up with Wave by making everything cost 4 repeatedly? Or you wave something out like Odin, and then you can Absorbing Man on Odin again. And I don't know what you're triggering for the 3rd and 4th time or whatever it ends up being. But it could be pretty wild. There's just so many combinations with this guy. It's like pretty much go down the on reveal list and you'll find like just a bunch that are going to work. So yeah, I'm excited for the combinations. I know everybody's going to find the craziest thing. And when you compare it to Wong, it's actually a really similar card. He has more power and he's less telegraphed because Wong gets played at that location and then he can get rejected with Enchantress or whatever, or Cosmo even, right? The opponent plays Cosmo there because they know that on reveal card is coming next. Whereas with the Absorbing Man, you already played the on reveal card and then you're going to choose where to play this guy. And it could be anywhere, and he's still going to copy the ability of the last card you played. So similar to Wong, similar to Mystique, in that she copies the last ongoing, he copies the last on reveal, and those cards I just mentioned are great. This is going to be great. But then we got number 1, She-Hulk. And honestly, out of all the cards revealed in Series 4 and 5, she's got to be in my top 3, I think. She-Hulk will be nuts. She's a 6 cost 10 power, but she's not really 6 cost now, is she? Because she's going to cost 1 less for each unspent energy last turn. To put that in perspective, there's things like Infinite where if you pass your turn 5, you can play him and he's 20 power. But now if you pass on your turn 5, this is going to be a 1 cost 10 power card. So you can stack that with a bunch of other cards because you're still going to have 5 available energy on turn 6 to spend on other things and still get 10 power out of She-Hulk, which is crazy. Now you did pass your turn 5, so there's concern there, but there's some combinations that are going to make her nuts. For instance, Moon Girl and She-Hulk were destined to be together. So you play Moon Girl on turn 4, and then you get 2 She-Hulks to hand. Then you pass on turn 5. And turn 6 comes around, you only have to spend 2 energy to get 20 power that you can actually split up in 2 different locations, 10 each apiece. And then to add to that combination even more, we have Sunspot, which you could play on turn 1, who's going to get that residual value from passing on turn 5 and any other unspent energy. And then Shuri, if we want to pass on the Moon Girl idea, right? And we just want to play Shuri on 4, well, now your She-Hulk on turn 6, if it's the first card you play, is going to be 20 power. So there's just so many ways to get so much power out here. Infinite level power out. But even better because, Infinite, you kind of restrain 2 of your turns with 5 being a pass and then 6 being only him. This is She-Hulk plus everything else that's in your hand that you can throw out. And then there's even ramp options with this card. Like let's say you play Psylocke, who gives you +1 energy next turn on turn 2. Well, then on turn 3, you had 4 energy and you could pass. So that by turn 4, this would only cost 2. And you could play this in another 2-drop, and you're probably pretty happy with that turn. Obvious counters are like Shang-Chi and all that kind of stuff, and that will exist and be a problem for this card. But I think it might be too bit of a surprise. You're not forced to play it at a certain location. It could run really well with Sarah, right? If you can get Sarah out somewhat early, pass on turn 5, then this is going to cost 0. Yeah, lots of combinations. I can't wait for this card. I'm super stoked for it. There we go. That's my top 10 on how I'm going to kind of prioritize on my token purchases. But here's a little snapshot on how I think they're going to do competitively, strength-wise, meta-wise, if they're going to be in the game for a long time or not, in the sense of actually being played. And then it's kind of just like how I was talking about them. You know, you got your Agent Coulson, Maria Hill, and M'Baku at the bottom in the D tier. I think they're going to stay there for quite some time. And then on the top end, you got She-Hulk and Absorbing Man. Those cards are going to be meta-defining, I think. They're really going to change the game if you can get them early, do some crazy combos with them. Attuma, I think, will be A. He actually is just such good power for energy, and there's already so many archetypes that work to keep him from destroying himself. So I think he'll do all right. Luke Cage is probably the most controversial one. Titania, I could honestly move up to A with every passing day. I think she's better and better. Luke Cage, I'm just not too sure yet. I think he needs more support, but as he gets more support in that kind of giving negative power out cards, he'll be pretty good. He'll go up the ranks and be a really viable card. Orka and HeliCarrier, honestly, they could have maybe been D tier, but I feel like they just have enough to make it past D tier and jump into C. And there we go. So that is kind of just a little snapshot of the meta, my priority list, and some details on Series 4. So let me know if you're stoked about Series 4 and how they're doing the new cards. And also, I want to know which card you're going to prioritize. I've already seen a lot of She-Hulk in my last video, so that's pretty awesome. But maybe there's some M'Baku lovers out there and they have big plans for him. I'd love to hear about it. So thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you guys next time.